Tonight, let us begin a journey into the past. A slow, gentle journey, told not in haste, but in calm reflection. It is the story of a man whose name you already know, yet whose life contains more than any single word could hold. Tonight, we will follow the life of Leonardo da Vinci. Before we begin, take a moment to settle yourself. Adjust your pillows. Dim the light in your room. Or let the darkness of evening settle softly around you. Perhaps there is a quiet sound nearby. The hum of a fan, the whisper of night air through a window. Allow those sounds to cradle you while we drift backward in time together. And as always, if this kind of calm, reflective storytelling brings you peace, consider subscribing, but only if you truly enjoy this way of listening. Now let us begin. It is April in the year 1452. The Italian countryside stretches quietly under the soft spring sky. In a small village called Vinci, nestled among olive groves and vineyards, a child enters the world. He is not born into a palace. There are no trumpets, no proclamations. He is born quietly, in a world where life and death pass, mostly unnoticed beyond the boundaries of family and neighbours. The boy's name is Leonardo. The official record of his birth is brief, almost stark. It states simply that on the 15th day of April, a child was born to Ser Piero, a notary, and Caterina, a local woman. The words are plain, carrying no hint of the extraordinary life that lay ahead. There is no mention of genius, no suggestion that this child would one day shape the very way humanity sees itself. And yet, as we know now, within this ordinary moment, a life of immense brilliance began. Leonardo was born out of wedlock. His father, Ser Piero da Vinci, was of respectable standing. As a notary, he lived in a world of parchment, ink, and contracts, a man trained to record the laws and transactions of Florence and its surrounding towns. His mother, Caterina, came from humbler origins. Some say she was a servant, others that she was the daughter of a farmer. Their relationship was brief, and they never married. This fact that Leonardo was illegitimate mattered in his time. It meant that he could not inherit his father's wealth. It meant that he was barred from certain schools, certain offices, certain pathways to status. In a rigid society, these were closed doors. And yet, what appeared a limitation became, for Leonardo, a form of freedom. His life would not follow prescribed paths. He would not be forced into the narrow corridors of law or church. He would wander instead through the open fields of curiosity, guided not by tradition, but by wonder. The hills of Vinci were his first classroom. To understand the boy Leonardo, imagine Tuscany in the middle of the 15th century. Rolling hills fold gently into one another, their slopes quilted with vineyards and olive groves. Cypress trees stand tall against the horizon, their dark green shapes pointing like spires toward the sky. Small stone houses, their roofs tiled in terracotta, dot the landscape. Narrow dirt paths wind between them, carrying peasants to their fields and shepherds to their flocks. The seasons shape life here. In spring, the hills are bright with blossoms and the air filled with birdsong. In summer, the fields shimmer with heat, the olive trees casting thin shadows on the ground. In autumn, grapes hang heavy on the vine, ready for harvest. In winter, the hills grow bare, the air sharp, the smoke of hearth fires curling into the pale sky. It is a land of beauty, of simplicity, of rhythm. And in this landscape, a boy's eyes are learning how to see. Leonardo does not pass his childhood like other children. While others play games of chase, shouting and laughing through the narrow village lanes, Leonardo lingers apart. He crouches by streams, watching how water moves. He notices how it curls around stones, how it breaks into ripples, how it forms spirals and eddies. He is fascinated by movement, by pattern, by the laws of nature revealed in the smallest details. He studies ants, carrying burdens larger than themselves. He watches birds, not just with admiration, but with intent. He notes how their wings tilt, how they glide, how they ride unseen currents of air. Already, the thought is stirring, if birds can fly, why not man? He looks at shadows, how they stretch long in the evening, how they grow short at midday. He wonders why the sky is blue, why the sun shines, why rain falls. He asks questions that adults cannot easily answer, Questions that seem too simple and yet too deep. Why does a cat always land on its feet? Why do bats fly differently than birds? Why does light bend when it enters water? Adults shrug, offering explanations rooted in habit or belief. But Leonardo is not discouraged. For he is not gathering answers, he is gathering questions. He is building a treasury of mysteries, to be unpacked slowly across a lifetime. His family situation gives him a strange duality. At his father's house, he encounters refinement, contracts and documents, discussions of law and property, the measured world of civic duty. At his mother's side, he knows the earth, the planting of fields, the cries of animals, the simple rhythms of rural life. This division might have troubled another child, but for Leonardo, it becomes fertile soil. He lives in both worlds, yet belongs to neither. He is both inside and outside, both participant and observer. This position of belonging everywhere and nowhere becomes a hallmark of his life. He learns little formal schooling. He is taught to read and write basic Italian and some arithmetic, but he never masters Latin, the language of scholars. He never attends the universities of Florence, where young men study law, theology, and philosophy. This will be called a deficiency, even a weakness, by some of his contemporaries. But in truth it frees him. He does not spend his youth repeating the thoughts of Aristotle or Galen. Instead, he spends it watching clouds, sketching leaves, observing the real. His book is nature itself. Drawing becomes his first true language. Picture him with a piece of charcoal, sketching lines onto a scrap of paper, or even onto the packed earth floor. His hand does not produce stiff shapes. He draws faces alive with expression, horses straining against reins, trees bending in the wind. He captures movement, tension, energy. Neighbours notice. His father notices. These are not the scribbles of a child. They are the works of an eye that sees deeper. Sir Piero begins to collect them. Perhaps with pride, perhaps with curiosity. There is a story told of these years. A farmer asked Leonardo to decorate a wooden shield. Instead of painting a simple family crest, Leonardo painted a terrifying monster, its mouth open, flames curling outward, its body adorned with scales and claws. The image was so vivid that when the shield was presented, the farmer recoiled. It seemed alive. This blending of observation and imagination of reality and invention will remain at the heart of Leonardo's genius. Even in these early years, his curiosity knows no bounds. He sketches fantastic creatures, combining the features of animals. He has studied wings of bats, bodies of lizards, eyes of birds. He studies how the veins of a leaf spread outward, and then imagines rivers flowing across a landscape in the same pattern. He observes the curl of hair and connects it to the swirling of water. For Leonardo, nature is a vast web of repeating patterns, each echoing the other. To draw one thing is to glimpse the structure of many, and yet he is lonely at times. He is quiet, introspective, not quick to join the games of other children. His head is often tilted, his gaze fixed on something far away or something very small. Some worry over him, wondering if his mind is too distant. But Leonardo is not absent. He is present in a way others cannot understand, absorbed in detail, carried into thought. This is the boy in Vinci, illegitimate, unschooled, solitary. And yet, in this quiet corner of Tuscany, he is already becoming something extraordinary. His eyes are training themselves to see what others overlook. His hands are learning to record not just shapes, but truths. His mind is storing questions that will echo for decades. It is worth pausing here with him. Imagine Leonardo lying in a field, looking at the sky. The air smells of grass and earth. Clouds drift slowly overhead, changing shape. A swallow darts across the air, wings tilting. The boy's eyes follow it, not with idle wonder, but with calculation, with curiosity. Already he is imagining, sketching in his mind, asking how does it work? Could man ever join them? The adults of Vinci see only a child, quiet and unusual, but we, looking back, see more. We see the beginnings of a mind that will one day paint the Mona Lisa, dissect the human body, design flying machines, and map the currents of rivers. And so our story begins. A boy neither noble nor poor, neither entirely inside nor outside society. a boy of silence, of sketches, of questions. The hills of Vinci are his first classroom. The rivers and birds are his first teachers. The world expects little of him, but he expects everything of the world. Florence, in the middle of the 15th century, was unlike any city in Europe. To walk its streets was to walk through a living masterpiece. Narrow lanes wound past tall stone houses, their windows draped with cloth to shield from the sun. Merchants shouted in the markets, selling silks, spices, and dyes brought from distant lands. Bakers' ovens spilled warm scents into the air. And above it all rose the great dome of Santa Maria del Fior, the cathedral built by Brunelleschi, its vast red crown dominating the skyline. Florence was alive with art, with learning, with ambition. The Renaissance was not an idea in books. It was a spirit in the air, an awakening of minds. In workshops, painters ground pigments into colours brighter than jewels. In churches, frescoes spread across walls, turning stone into visions of heaven. In squares, poets recited verses while philosophers debated the nature of man, of God, of the stars above. It was here that the Medici family, wealthy bankers and patrons of art, fostered genius by opening their coffers to artists, scholars, and architects. For a boy like Leonardo, Florence was a crucible. His father, Ser Piero, had by now recognized his son's unusual gift. The drawings Leonardo made of animals, of faces, of fantastical beasts were too alive, too skillful to be ignored. So, Ser Piero gathered some of them and took them to Andrea del Verrocchio, one of the most respected masters of the city. Verrocchio was not only a painter, but also a sculptor, a goldsmith, and an engineer. His workshop was a hive of creativity, filled with apprentices mixing paints, sketching designs, carving clay, and learning the disciplines of their craft. It was a place where the boundaries between art and science blurred, where a young mind could drink from many sources at once. Verrocchio saw the boy's drawings and agreed to take him in, and thus Leonardo's apprenticeship began. Apprenticeship in a Renaissance workshop was demanding. It was not only about painting. It was about learning every aspect of the crafts that made art possible. Leonardo did not begin with a brush in hand, working on grand panels. He began with the basics. He ground pigments, taking minerals like lapis lazuli and malachite, crushing them into fine powder, mixing them with oils or egg yolk to make paints. He prepared gesso, the plaster that covered wooden panels and gave them a smooth surface for painting. He learned to sketch drapery, studying how cloth folds and falls. He drew hands, faces, bodies, practicing proportions over and over until they became natural. It was tedious, humbling work, but for Leonardo, every detail mattered. Even in these simple tasks, he studied deeply. How did light strike cloth? How did shadows soften at the edges? How did the curve of a wrist suggest movement? He absorbed everything. In Verrocchio's studio, he was surrounded by talent. Apprentices competed and learned from one another, each hoping to catch the master's eye. Among them, Leonardo's quiet concentration set him apart. He was not the loudest, nor the fastest, but his hand carried something the others did not, an ability to make the lifeless seem alive. A story from this time has become legend. Verrocchio was working on a painting of the baptism of Christ. As was custom, he assigned parts of the work to his apprentices. Leonardo was given the task of painting one of the angels. He approached it with the care that defined him, layering colours with subtlety, softening edges until they seemed to blur into one another. When the painting was finished, something astonishing was revealed. Leonardo's angel glowed with a life that the other figures lacked. Its face was tender, its expression serene, its hair shimmering with delicate light. Compared to the stiffer forms around it, the angel seemed to breathe. Legend has it that when Verrocchio saw this, he put down his brush and vowed never to paint again, humbled by the talent of his apprentice. Whether this tale is true or embellished, it captures the essence of what was happening. Leonardo, still young, was already outshining his master. In these years, he began to develop the techniques that would later define him. He studied light and shadow, creating depth, not through lines, but through gradual transitions. This technique, later called sfumato, allowed him to make forms appear as though they emerged gently from mist, soft and natural. He studied anatomy, sketching muscles and bones to understand how bodies moved beneath the skin. He experimented with perspective, learning how to create the illusion of space, of distance, of buildings receding into the horizon. For Leonardo, these were not separate studies. They were all connected. To paint the human face, he needed to understand muscles. To draw landscapes, he needed to understand geology, how rocks formed and rivers flowed. To create believable light, he needed to study optics, how the eye perceives. Everything fed into everything else. His first independent works began to emerge. One of them was the Annunciation. It shows the angel Gabriel greeting the Virgin Mary, announcing that she will bear a child. The scene is quiet, filled with delicate detail. The angel kneels in a garden, its wings finely painted with layers of feathers. Mary sits beside a lectern, her hand raised in surprise and grace. Behind them stretches a background of architecture and distant hills, drawn with careful perspective. What strikes the viewer is not drama, but serenity. The folds of Mary's robe fall with natural grace. The wings of the angel shimmer with softness. The background fades into the horizon with delicate light. It is as though the divine moment is happening not in a realm apart, but in a world we recognize. A garden, a sky, a landscape. Another early work, The Adoration of the Magi, though unfinished, reveals his ambition. It depicts the moment when the three kings kneel before the infant Christ, surrounded by a throng of figures. Leonardo began it with sweeping energy, filling the scene with movement and life. Horses rear in the background, figures twist and gesture. The Virgin sits at the center calm and radiant. Even in its incomplete state, the painting feels alive, pulsing with motion, filled with humanity. Yet already, Leonardo's restlessness showed itself. He began works but did not finish them. His mind moved too quickly, his curiosity pulling him onward. Patrons grew impatient. But those who saw what he did complete understood that something rare was unfolding. In Florence, he was surrounded by other masters: Botticelli, Ghirlandaio, Filippino Lippi. The air was alive with rivalry and inspiration. The young Michelangelo was growing into his own genius. And yet, Leonardo was not merely one among them. He was something different. Where others sought to impress with brilliance, he sought to understand with precision. He would spend hours studying how lips curve into a smile, how shadows gather in the corner of an eye, how the veins of a leaf spread outward like rivers. His art was not display. It was inquiry. By the end of his apprenticeship, Leonardo was already a master in his own right. He had learned the crafts of painting, sculpture, and design. He had absorbed perspective, anatomy, and light. But more importantly, he had begun to weave them into something uniquely his own. Imagine him walking through the streets of Florence at dusk, sketchbook in hand. The air is warm, the bells of the cathedral toll in the distance. He pauses to draw a man carrying a sack, capturing the strain in his shoulders. He sketches a child laughing, the corners of the mouth lifting in joy. He notes how shadows stretch across the cobblestones, how buildings fade into the haze. This is Leonardo in his youth, quiet, observant, absorbed. Apprenticeship has given him skill. Florence has given him inspiration. But his mind, restless and wide, is already moving beyond what either can contain. And so, we leave him here, a young artist on the threshold of greatness, his eyes full of questions, his hand full of promise. When Leonardo stepped out from the shadow of Verrocchio's workshop, he did so not as an apprentice, but as a man beginning to carry the weight of his own name. He was still young, not yet 30, his reputation growing quietly in Florence. He had been trained in the ways of art, of sculpture, of mechanics. He had contributed to paintings in Verrocchio's studio. He had impressed patrons with his skill. And now, he would take his first steps into independence. Florence, at this time, was alive with artistic energy. Botticelli's graceful mythological visions were admired across the city. Domenico Ghirlandaio painted frescoes alive with detail and grandeur. Filippino Lippi carried on the delicacy of his father's style. The competition was fierce, the expectations high. For Leonardo, this was both opportunity and challenge. His name was known, but not yet celebrated. He needed to prove himself, and so he accepted commissions. Religious scenes for chapels, portraits for wealthy citizens, works that would place his name in public spaces, where all could see what he could do. One of his earliest great projects was the Adoration of the Magi, commissioned in 1481 by the monks of San Donato. The painting was to depict the moment when the three kings knelt before the infant Christ, offering gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. It was a scene often painted, filled with symbolism and devotion. Leonardo approached it with ambition. His sketches for the work reveal a vision, unlike anything Florence had seen. At the center sits the Virgin Mary, calm and radiant, the child in her arms. Around her, figures twist and gesture with energy, each reacting to the divine child in their own way. Some kneeling, some whispering, some reaching forward in awe. Behind them, horses rear, riders clash, architecture crumbles. It is not a scene of serene order, but of living drama. Even in its unfinished state for Leonardo, as so often, never completed it, the painting pulses with life. The figures feel real, their emotions complex, their gestures alive with movement. It is as though the entire world has converged on this moment, not in frozen reverence, but in the confusion and wonder of reality. For Leonardo, this was always the goal: to capture truth, not formula. To paint not just how things looked, but how they lived. Yet already, the pattern of his life emerged. He did not finish the painting. His notebooks are filled with studies for it, sketches of horses, of twisting bodies, of faces. But the panel itself remains incomplete, brushstrokes fading into bare wood, the vision never fully realized. To his patrons, this was frustration. They had paid for a work of devotion, an altarpiece for worship, not an unfinished experiment. But to Leonardo, the painting had already served its purpose. The questions it asked about movement, about light, about human emotion had already been explored. Once his curiosity was satisfied, his hand no longer obeyed. This tension would define his career. He was not a painter of products. He was a seeker of truths. And truth is rarely finished. Other works from this period show his brilliance in smaller scale. Portraits that captured not only appearance, but presence. One shows a young woman, Ginevra de' Benci, her face pale and serene, her eyes distant, her hair delicately painted. Behind her, juniper bushes form a play on her name, Ginevro and Ginepro, the Italian word for juniper. The painting is subtle, quiet, yet alive with psychological depth. In another commission, The Virgin of the Rocks, he began exploring ideas that would become central to his art. In a rocky cave, the Virgin Mary sits with the infant Christ, John the Baptist, and an angel. The figures are arranged in a pyramid, their gestures forming a web of connection. Light filters into the cave softly, illuminating faces and hands. Shadows gather around the rocks, mysterious and deep. What strikes the viewer is not only the religious subject, but the naturalism. The rocks are painted with geological accuracy, each crevice and fold rendered, as if Leonardo had studied them for hours. The plants at their feet are depicted with botanical precision. Once again, art and science merge. To paint the Virgin, he studies the earth. To paint the divine, he paints the real. Florence admired his work, but also puzzled over him. Patrons complained of delays. Commissions dragged on. Some were never completed. And yet, those who saw what he did finish could not deny its power. His figures were not stiff symbols, but living people. His backgrounds were not decorative, but landscapes that breathed. His light was not flat, but soft, mysterious, alive. By his 20s, Leonardo was already known as one of Florence's finest painters. But he was restless. His notebooks reveal sketches not only of paintings, but of machines, pulleys, bridges, flying devices. He studied geometry, anatomy, optics. He dissected animals, drawing their muscles and bones. He wrote lists of things he wanted to know: how water flows, how birds fly, how the heart beats. He was not content with one discipline. He was not even content with one city. Florence was brilliant, yes, but also crowded with rivals, bound by tradition. shaped by politics, Leonardo longed for something else, a new horizon. Around this time, he began to look north toward Milan, a city ruled by Ludovico Sforza, ambitious, powerful, eager to display his wealth and strength. Milan was not only a city of art, but of engineering, of fortifications, of military might. And Leonardo saw in it a chance to expand. He drafted a letter to the Duke of Milan, offering his services. It is one of the most revealing documents of his life. In it, he barely mentions painting at all. Instead, he presents himself as an engineer. He lists his abilities to design bridges, to construct cannons, to build armored vehicles, to fortify cities, to divert rivers. He promises to create machines of war unlike any seen before. Only at the end, as if an afterthought, does he add that he can also paint. This was no accident. Leonardo knew what Milan valued, and he knew too that he was more than painter. He was an inventor, a thinker, a man who could envision futures others could not. The Duke accepted. And so, Leonardo prepared to leave Florence. But before we follow him north, let us linger a moment longer in these years, for they reveal much of who he was becoming. Imagine him in Florence, walking slowly along the Arno River. The water reflects the evening sky, rippling with the breeze. Leonardo pauses, sketchbook in hand. He draws the currents, the way they spiral around stones, the way they curl and twist. To others, it is just a river. To Leonardo, it is a puzzle, a mystery to be solved. Or picture him in a church, sketching faces in the crowd, a merchant, his brow furrowed with calculation, a beggar eyes wide with sorrow, a child mouth open in laughter. Later, these faces will appear in his paintings, transformed, but rooted in reality. Or see him in his workshop, bent over the body of a bird, carefully dissecting its wing, noting how the bones fit, how the feathers layer. His notes fill the page, written backward in mirrored script. To others, it would look like code. To him, it is simply natural a way to keep his thoughts his own, and to keep the ink from smudging under his left hand. This is Leonardo in his early career, painter, engineer, scientist, dreamer. His patrons want paintings. He wants the universe. And so he leaves Florence, carrying with him his notebooks, his sketches, his lute, and his restless imagination. Ahead lies Milan, the court of Ludovico Sforza, the city where he will paint the Last Supper and design machines centuries ahead of their time. Florence has given him training, reputation, and opportunity, but it cannot contain him. His mind is already moving beyond its walls. Leonardo da Vinci carried his notebooks with him everywhere. Small, portable, filled with scraps of paper, they were the silent companions of his restless mind. In them, he sketched faces glimpsed in the marketplace, gears and pulleys imagined in a dream, questions written in mirrored script. To look through these notebooks is to step into the current of a mind that never stopped moving. Page after page reveals not only drawings, but observations, a swirl of water around a stone, the pattern of a bird's feathers, the structure of a human arm, the design of a bridge, notes about geometry, puzzles of perspective, lists of things to learn, describe the tongue of the woodpecker. Go to the canal and observe the eddies. Study the jaw of a crocodile. His curiosity is endless, his subjects limitless. In an age when most men were content to master one craft, Leonardo stretched himself across them all. He was not only painter, but engineer, architect, anatomist, botanist, philosopher. He did not see these pursuits as separate. They were all facets of the same jewel, the search to understand the laws of nature. Among his sketches are machines of astonishing imagination. He designed armored vehicles, resembling the tanks of centuries later, circular, studded with cannons, meant to roll across battlefields. He drew plans for enormous crossbows, large enough to hurl stones at city walls. He envisioned bridges that could be quickly assembled and dismantled, allowing armies to cross rivers at speed. He studied flight obsessively. His notebooks are filled with drawings of wings, modelled after birds and bats. He created devices with pulleys, levers, and flapping mechanisms, meant to carry man into the air. He sketched a parachute, a pointed canopy of cloth meant to slow descent. He drew what looks like the world's first helicopter, a spiral screw of linen designed to twist upward into the sky. None of these machines were built in his lifetime. Some were impossible with the materials of the 15th century, but their brilliance lies not in their practicality, but in their imagination. He saw what could be, not only what was. He thought in futures the world had not yet reached. And yet there is a paradox. Leonardo, the man who designed weapons of war, despised violence. His notebooks contain words of sorrow for the cruelty of men, for the destruction of battlefields. Why then did he draw cannons and tanks? Perhaps to please patrons, to secure commissions in a world that valued military strength. Perhaps because he believed that to understand peace, one must also understand war. Perhaps because, to him, machines were not symbols of destruction, but puzzles of force and motion. Still, he turned just as eagerly to peaceful designs. He imagined machines for lifting water, for irrigating fields, for draining marshes. He sketched stage sets and theatrical devices, fountains that could delight with trickling streams, and musical instruments of unusual shape. His mind was not fixed on war. It was fixed on movement, on possibility, on the transformation of ideas into form. One subject in particular fascinated him above all: water. He called it the driving force of nature. He observed how rivers carved valleys, how currents twisted into spirals, how waves crashed and receded. His notebooks are filled with drawings of vortices, whirlpools, rippling waves. He studied how water flowed over obstacles, how it carried sediment, how it shaped the land. In these drawings, art and science merge seamlessly. His sketches of eddies are as delicate as any painting, their lines curling like hair or smoke, and yet they are also data, observations of movement captured in ink. He was mapping fluid dynamics centuries before it would be named. For Leonardo, water was both material and metaphor. It represented change, motion, the flow of life itself. To understand water was to glimpse the hidden laws of the universe. Light, too, consumed him. He experimented with optics, studying how light entered the eye, how it bent through glass, how shadows were cast. He drew diagrams of vision, showing lines converging from objects to the pupil. He explored the effects of perspective, how distant objects appear smaller, how atmosphere softens colours over distance. These studies were not abstract. They shaped his art. His technique of sfumato, the gentle blending of edges, the soft transitions of tone, grew directly from his observation of how light truly behaves. He understood that the world is not made of hard lines, but of gradations, of subtle shifts. His paintings, like the Mona Lisa, glow with this knowledge. Anatomy drew him into even deeper mysteries. He dissected animals first: horses, birds, oxen. He drew their muscles, their bones, their sinews. But soon he turned to humans. Quietly, often at night, in hospitals or morgues, he dissected bodies. It was dangerous, frowned upon by the church, yet he pursued it obsessively. What he produced astonishes even today. Drawings of the human skull, its chambers rendered in delicate cross-section. Sketches of the muscles of the arm, each tendon precisely shown. Studies of the heart, its valves and chambers so accurate that centuries later, doctors would marvel at their precision. He even drew a fetus curled within the womb, captured with tenderness and detail. Leonardo was not content to see the body as surface. He wanted to know how it worked, how it moved, how it lived. He recorded not only structure, but function: how lungs expanded, how blood flowed, how the spine curved. He was centuries ahead of his time, imagining systems that science would not confirm until the modern era. But he never published these studies. His drawings remained locked in his notebooks, written in mirrored script, shared with almost no one. Why? Perhaps he feared the wrath of authorities. Perhaps he felt his work was never finished. Perhaps he simply studied for himself, not for recognition. Whatever the reason, the result was the same: much of his genius remained hidden for centuries. Only later, when his notebooks were rediscovered, would the world realize how far ahead he had been. Leonardo's mind did not separate disciplines. To him, the veins of a leaf resembled rivers spreading across land. The spirals of hair resembled whirlpools of water. The proportions of the human body echoed the proportions of buildings and temples. Everything mirrored everything else. The universe, to him, was a great web of patterns, repeating endlessly. This vision found expression in one of his most famous drawings, the Vitruvian Man. A figure of a man, arms and legs outstretched, inscribed within a circle and a square. It was not merely a study of proportion. It was a symbol of harmony, of the connection between the human body and the cosmos. It showed that man was a microcosm of the universe, bound by the same geometric laws that govern stars, rivers, and trees. To look at it is to see Leonardo's mind distilled art, science, philosophy, geometry, all in one image. And yet, for all his brilliance, Leonardo struggled. His curiosity scattered him. He moved from subject to subject, filling notebooks with ideas but leaving projects unfinished. He promised patrons great works, but delivered slowly, if at all. He could not confine himself to one pursuit, one painting, one commission. His mind was too wide, his hunger too deep. To some, this was failure. To others, it was genius. For Leonardo was not a craftsman in the ordinary sense. He was a seeker. He was not interested in completing what others demanded. He was interested in exploring what the universe whispered to him. It is worth imagining him here, in these years before Milan, sitting at a wooden desk, candlelight flickering over the page. His pen scratches across the paper, left hand pulling lines of mirrored script, right hand steadying the sheet. Around him are sketches: a bird's wing, a spiral of water, a diagram of the eye, a fantastical machine of gears and pulleys. Outside, Florence sleeps. Inside, Leonardo is awake, his mind soaring across the boundaries of time. These notebooks would not be published. Many would be scattered, lost, hidden for centuries. And yet, within them, he had already mapped much of the modern world. He had drawn helicopters before helicopters, tanks before tanks, parachutes before parachutes. He had studied anatomy before modern medicine. He had described fluid dynamics before physics. He was, in every sense, a dreamer of futures. And so, as he prepares to leave Florence for Milan, Leonardo is no longer only an artist. He is an engineer, a scientist, an inventor, a philosopher. He is a man carrying within him questions that no single city, no single discipline, no single lifetime could fully contain. His patrons see him as a painter. He knows himself as more. Ahead lies Milan, the court of Ludovico Sforza, a city of power, of ambition, of politics. There Leonardo will paint the Last Supper. There he will design machines to astonish the Duke. There he will weave together art and science in ways the world has never seen. But for now, let us pause with him here. Imagine him closing his notebook, setting aside his pen, blowing out the candle. The room falls dark. Outside, the Arno River flows quietly beneath the stars. The young man who has already glimpsed the secrets of flight, of water, of anatomy, rests for the night. His mind still restless, still dreaming. In the year 1482, Leonardo da Vinci left Florence behind. He was 30 years old, carrying his notebooks, his lute, and the restless fire of his curiosity. Florence had given him training, reputation, and opportunity. But Florence was crowded with rivals, bound by politics, and filled with expectations. Leonardo, always restless, sought something different. His eyes turned north, toward Milan. Milan was not like Florence. Florence was a republic, proud of its civic independence, filled with merchants and bankers. Milan was a duchy, ruled by power and ambition. Its leader, Ludovico Sforza, was known as Il Moro, the Moor, for his dark complexion and commanding presence. Ludovico sought to strengthen his rule with displays of wealth, with fortifications, with art and spectacle. He wanted Milan to shine as brightly as Florence or Venice. For a man like Leonardo, Milan was a chance. Before leaving, he wrote a letter to Ludovico Sforza. It is one of the most remarkable job applications in history. In it, Leonardo does not describe himself as a painter. Instead, he presents himself as a military engineer. He writes of his ability to design bridges that can be carried and assembled quickly, to build fortifications that resist attack, to construct cannons and catapults, to divert rivers, to create armored vehicles that can storm battlefields. He lists invention after invention, each described with precision and confidence. Only at the end does he mention painting, as though it were a small addition. I can also execute sculpture in marble, bronze, or clay, he writes, and in painting, I can do everything possible. It is a brilliant act of self-presentation. Leonardo knows what Milan values: power, strength, machines of war, and he knows that his talent reaches far beyond painting. Ludovico accepts, and so Leonardo travels north. The journey from Florence to Milan would have taken days. He likely rode on horseback, accompanied by assistants, carrying his notebooks and instruments. As he crossed the Tuscan hills, through mountain passes and across rivers, he left behind the familiar domes and towers of Florence for the flat, fertile plains of Lombardy. When he arrived, he entered a city of ambition. Milan in the late 15th century was bustling, its streets filled with merchants and soldiers, its palaces echoing with the steps of courtiers. The Sforza castle stood massive, its towers rising above the city walls, a fortress of red brick built to symbolize power. Churches and monasteries lined the streets, their cloisters filled with monks and students. The air carried the sounds of hammers striking metal, carts rolling over stone, and the chatter of markets. Here, Leonardo would make his home for nearly 2 decades. At court, he became more than an artist. He was a man of many roles. He designed military devices for Ludovico, though many were never built. His notebooks from these years are filled with war machines multi, barreled cannons, siege ladders, armoured chariots bristling with blades. Some are practical, others fantastical, but all are driven by his fascination with mechanics, with force, with the possibilities of engineering. He also served as a designer of pageantry. Renaissance courts loved spectacle, and Ludovico's was no exception. For banquets, for weddings, for festivals, Leonardo designed elaborate sets and machines. He created moving stages, costumes, devices that made statues speak, fountains that sprayed wine, mechanical lions that walked forward and opened their chests to release lilies. These inventions dazzled audiences, showing not only Ludovico's wealth, but also the brilliance of his court. And Leonardo, always a lover of music, played his lute for the Duke. His skill as a musician was renowned. He had built his own instruments, some shaped from silver, with forms unlike any others. His music, like his art, was said to enchant listeners, carrying both elegance and emotion. In Milan, Leonardo became not just painter, not just engineer, but entertainer, architect, scientist, and musician, a man whose talents touched every corner of court life. Yet painting was never far away. During these early Milan years, he began work on portraits. One of the most famous is Lady with an Ermine, depicting Cecilia Gallerani, a young woman of intelligence and grace, who was the Duke's mistress. She is shown in profile, her gaze turned slightly, her hands cradling a small white ermine. The painting glows with life. Cecilia's face is delicate, her expression thoughtful, her skin luminous. The ermine, rendered with delicate fur and alert eyes, seems alive, a symbol both of purity and of Ludovico himself, who was associated with the animal. The portrait is not stiff, not formal. It is intimate, capturing personality, spirit presence. It is as if Cecilia might turn and speak at any moment. This was Leonardo's gift, to paint not only the surface of a person, but their soul. He also began work on grander projects. One of the most ambitious was a colossal bronze statue of a horse, commissioned by Ludovico in honor of his father, Francesco Sforza. The horse was to be larger than any sculpture of its kind, standing in the courtyard of the Sforza castle as a symbol of the family's power. Leonardo threw himself into the project, studying horses with obsessive care. His notebooks from this time are filled with sketches of their muscles, their legs, their movements. He measured proportions, experimented with poses, imagined the colossal form in clay and bronze. He created a clay model over 20 feet tall, an astonishing achievement in itself. Visitors to Milan marveled at it, calling it one of the wonders of the age. But the bronze casting was never completed. War broke out, resources were diverted, and the project stalled. In time, the clay model was destroyed by invading soldiers. For Leonardo, it was a disappointment, but also a lesson. Even genius cannot escape the tides of politics and war. Despite such setbacks, his years in Milan were fertile. He designed buildings and fortifications, experimenting with plans for ideal cities with wide streets, canals for clean water, separate zones for industry and living. His visions were far ahead of his time, imagining urban designs that would not appear until centuries later. He studied anatomy more deeply, dissecting human bodies with the help of local hospitals. He filled pages with drawings of muscles, organs, bones, each rendered with precision. His dissections grew more daring, his observations more exact. He studied not only structure but motion, how the heart valves opened and closed, how the lungs expanded, how the spine curved as a man bent. He studied geology, examining rocks in the Lombard hills, noting the shells of ancient sea creatures embedded in stone. He concluded, centuries before geology was formalized, that the land had once been covered by water. He studied flight, releasing birds into the air and watching their movements, sketching wings and imagining machines that might lift men skyward. All of these studies, anatomy, geology, flight, mechanics, filled his notebooks, merging with his art, feeding his vision. Yet even amid all this, Leonardo remained slow to complete works. Patrons grew impatient, but Ludovico tolerated him, perhaps recognizing that what Leonardo offered was not only paintings, but prestige. To have Leonardo at court was to have brilliance itself, a living emblem of Renaissance genius. And Leonardo gave him wonders in return, not always in the form of finished canvases, but in machines, designs, entertainments, and presents. In these years before the Last Supper, Leonardo was still finding his fullest voice. He was known in Milan as a court artist, a designer, an engineer, a musician. He was admired, even envied. And yet he was also elusive, often late, often distracted by new ideas. Imagine him walking through the courtyards of the Sforza castle, dressed in tunics of unusual colour, his hair long, his eyes distant. Courtiers greet him, but his gaze is already elsewhere, on the flight of a bird overhead, on the pattern of water in the moat, on the possibilities of machines not yet built. He is both present and absent, both a man of his time and a man of the future. And soon, Ludovico would give him a commission unlike any other. A commission that would become one of the most famous paintings in history. In the refectory of a Dominican convent, Leonardo would paint a mural that would capture a single moment of human emotion, freezing it in time forever. The Last Supper was waiting. In the quiet refectory of the convent of Santa Maria del Grazie in Milan, the monks gathered each day for their meals. The room was long and narrow, its walls plain, its purpose simple. It was a place of eating, of silence, of reflection. But in the late 1490s, this humble dining hall became the setting for one of the most extraordinary works of art ever created. The Duke of Milan, Ludovico Sforza, commissioned Leonardo da Vinci to paint a mural there. The subject was to be the Last Supper, the moment from the Gospel of John, when Jesus tells his disciples that one among them will betray him. It was a scene painted many times before, but Leonardo approached it in his own way. For him, it was not enough to show the story. He wanted to show the human soul. Imagine Leonardo entering the refectory for the first time. The walls are bare. The light filters in softly from high windows. The long wooden tables stand ready for the monks. He envisions one wall transformed not into decoration, but into revelation. A frozen moment of tension, of emotion, of humanity. Most earlier paintings of the Last Supper showed the apostles calmly arranged, each a figure of devotion, Jesus set apart in quiet divinity. But Leonardo asked, what was this moment really like? What happens when a man tells his closest companions that one of them will betray him? Shock, confusion, anger, disbelief. He wanted to capture that instant, the eruption of feeling, the wave of human reaction. And so he began. At the center he placed Jesus, calm, serene, resigned, his hands spread gently, palms open. His figure forms a triangle, the ancient symbol of harmony and divinity. He is the still point, the eye of the storm, while around him emotion swirls. The apostles react in groups of three, each cluster caught in motion. To his right, John leans inward, youthful, tender, his head bowed. Beside him, Peter turns sharply, his expression fierce, his hand on John's shoulder, as if demanding answers. Judas, the betrayer, recoils into shadow, clutching a small bag, the silver he has been paid. His face is tense, his posture withdrawn, as though he shrinks from the light. To Jesus' left, other apostles gesture and murmur, their faces alive with disbelief. Thomas raises his finger, foreshadowing his later doubt. James throws his arms wide in anguish. Philip leans forward, as if pleading for explanation. Each figure is a live, distinct individual. This is not a row of symbols. It is a gathering of men, each with his own heart, his own reaction, his own humanity. The table stretches between them and us, covered in simple food: bread, wine, fish. The dishes are painted with such care that one can almost feel the coolness of the ceramics, the roughness of the bread's crust. A spilled salt cellar lies near Judas, a subtle symbol of betrayal and bad luck. Behind the figures, 3 windows open onto a distant landscape of hills and sky, bathed in light. The central window frames Jesus' head, forming a natural halo, yet one made not of gold leaf or radiant beams, but of open air and heaven's light. It is both sacred and natural, divine and human. But Leonardo was never satisfied with tradition. He did not paint the Last Supper as a fresco, the method in which pigments are applied to wet plaster. Frescoes required speed. Once the plaster dried, changes were impossible. Leonardo, always meticulous, always experimenting, wanted more time. He wanted to work slowly, layering colour, shading carefully, achieving the subtle transitions of light he so loved. So, he tried something new. He painted on a dry wall, mixing tempera and oil, hoping for richer tones and greater control. At first, it worked. The painting glowed with colour, its detail astonishing. Visitors marvelled. The Duke himself admired it, calling it one of the greatest works of the age. But the experiment carried a flaw. The paint did not bind well to the wall. Within years it began to flake, to fade. Humidity, candles smoke, and time ate at it. By the middle of the 16th century, it was already described as ruined. Over the centuries, floods, neglect, and even war damaged it further. Napoleon's soldiers used the refectory as a stable. Bombs in the Second World War destroyed much of the surrounding building. And yet, despite all this, the painting survived fragile, faded, but still luminous. What is it that makes the Last Supper so enduring? Perhaps it is the psychology. No one before had painted emotion with such intensity. Each apostle is a study of the human soul, captured in a gesture, a glance, a furrowed brow. We see fear, anger, sorrow, disbelief, the entire spectrum of reaction to betrayal. Perhaps it is the balance, Jesus at the center, still and calm, framed by light, while chaos unfolds around him. The composition is mathematical, precise, and yet alive, filled with movement. Perhaps it is the humanity, for this is not only a story of Christ and his disciples, it is the story of friendship, of trust broken, of sorrow shared. We recognize ourselves in these faces. We, too, know shock, anger, grief. Leonardo has taken a sacred story and made it human, without diminishing its divinity. He has brought heaven down to earth. Imagine the monks sitting in that refectory, eating their bread and fish, while before them stretched this mural. Each meal became a meditation. As they lifted their cups of wine, they were reminded of another table, another supper, another wine poured out in sorrow. As they broke their bread, they saw the apostles breaking theirs. For Leonardo, this was the power of painting, not to decorate walls, but to transform spaces, to turn daily life into reflection. Even in ruin, the painting commands. Those who saw it fresh described its brilliance. Giorgio Vasari, the biographer of Renaissance artists, wrote that it was a thing marvellous and astonishing. Even centuries later, travellers came to Milan to see it. Despite its decay, writers described its fading forms, yet still found themselves moved. In the 20th century, restorers laboured to preserve it, removing overpainting, stabilising fragments, revealing what remained. Today, what we see is only a shadow of the original, and yet the power remains. To stand before it is to feel the presence of genius, to glimpse the mind of a man who soared deeper than others. During the years he painted The Last Supper, Leonardo was also filling his notebooks with inventions, with studies of nature, with ideas for projects never realized. He worked for Ludovico on fortifications, on canal systems, on designs for festivals. He painted portraits. He dissected bodies. He observed water and light. His mind was never still, but The Last Supper stands apart, for in it, his gifts converge: the psychology of the human face, the geometry of composition, the study of light and shadow, the search for truth. It is not only a painting, it is a meditation. And yet, even here, Leonardo was restless. He did not rush to complete other commissions. He left works unfinished. He disappointed patrons. Ludovico tolerated him, for he valued Leonardo's presence, his brilliance, his ability to dazzle guests with designs and entertainments. But beneath the glitter of court life, shadows were gathering. The political winds of Italy were shifting. France was advancing. War loomed. Milan, with all its power, would soon face upheaval. And Leonardo, whose genius thrived on peace and curiosity, would find himself once again unsettled. But before we leave this chapter, let us pause again. Picture the refectory of Santa Maria del Grazie. The monks have finished their meal. The hall is silent, save for the soft scrape of benches. Candles flicker low. On the far wall, the mural glows in the dim light, faded now, but once vivid, alive. At the center, Jesus sits calm, still, at peace. Around him, voices rise, hands gesture, faces twist with emotion. A moment of betrayal captured forever, a story of sorrow and divinity woven into paint. Leonardo has given the world not merely an image, but a vision. And though the colors fade, the vision remains. When Milan fell to the French in 1499, the world Leonardo had known collapsed almost overnight. Ludovico Sforza, his patron of nearly 2 decades, was captured and imprisoned. The court scattered. Projects halted. The colossal clay model of Leonardo's horse, left vulnerable, was destroyed by soldiers who used it for target practice. For Leonardo, it was a moment of dislocation. He was 47 years old, respected, admired, but without a patron, without a fixed home. He gathered his notebooks, his instruments, his unfinished paintings, and he left Milan behind. His journey took him first to Venice, then back to Florence, the city of his youth. Florence had changed. It was still a place of art and learning, but it was now also a place of tension, of rivalries, of shifting powers. Into this world, Leonardo returned, no longer the young apprentice, but the celebrated master. And yet, even here, he was restless. Florence received him with honor. Patrons sought his work. He was given commissions, welcomed back into the circle of artists and thinkers. But he was not alone in his brilliance. Younger talents were rising, none more formidable than Michelangelo Buonarroti. Michelangelo was almost a generation younger, fiery, intense, filled with pride. Where Leonardo was elegant and measured, Michelangelo was forceful and raw. Their rivalry became the talk of Florence. It was not only a contest of skill, but a vision. The city, eager to harness their genius, commissioned both men to paint great murals in the council hall of the Palazzo Vecchio. Leonardo was assigned the Battle of Anghiari, Michelangelo the Battle of Cassina. Each was to depict a moment of struggle, a scene of history captured in monumental scale. Leonardo began with studies. His sketches for the Battle of Anghiari are astonishing. He chose to depict a violent clash over a standard, a group of men and horses locked in furious struggle. The faces are twisted with rage, teeth bared, eyes wide. Muscles strain, reins pull horses' rear, their manes flying. The scene is chaos, captured with precision. It is not heroic or orderly. It is brutal, raw, filled with the energy of battle. Michelangelo, meanwhile, planned to show soldiers surprised while bathing, their bodies twisting as they scramble to arms. His figures were muscular, dramatic, filled with sculptural power. The rivalry electrified Florence. Crowds came to see the cartoons, the full-size drawings of each work. Artists studied them, copying the figures, admiring the mastery. It was said that younger painters learned more from those unfinished cartoons than from years of training. And yet, in the end, neither painting was completed. Leonardo experimented with a new technique for the Battle of Anghiari, hoping to achieve the depth and richness of oil painting on a wall. He applied a mixture of oils and varnish, then attempted to dry it by heating the surface. The result was disastrous. The paint ran, the surface cracked. The work decayed even as he laboured. Frustrated, he abandoned it. Michelangelo, too, left his mural unfinished, called away to Rome by the Pope. And so, Florence lost what might have been the greatest artistic duel in history. The walls of the council hall remained incomplete, the masterpieces fading into legend. Today, only fragments and copies survive, ghostly reminders of what once was. During these years, Leonardo also turned to portraits and religious works. One of the most debated is the Salvator Mundi, Saviour of the World. It depicts Christ, one hand raised in blessing, the other holding a crystal orb. The face is serene, the robes luminous, the orb a symbol of divine power. The painting's history is complex, its authorship debated. Some believe it is wholly by Leonardo's hand, others that it was completed with assistance. But its essence carries his mark, the softness of the features, the mysterious light, the quiet presence that feels alive. Another project was a vast mural for the monks of Sant Onofrio, known as the Leader and the Swan. The subject was mythological, unusual for Leonardo, showing Leda entwined with the swan Zeus. Though the painting itself is lost, copies and descriptions suggest it was filled with sensual grace, the figure of Leda twisting with elegance, her body rendered with anatomical precision. Again, Leonardo's restlessness left much unfinished. Patrons grew impatient. Rivals whispered that he was unreliable. But those who saw even fragments of his work knew its power. In these years, he also returned to his scientific studies with intensity. He dissected human bodies, filling his notebooks with drawings of muscles, veins, and bones. He studied optics, writing about how the eye perceives light, how perspective shifts with distance, how colours change in air. He studied geology, noting the layers of rock in the hills, the fossils of shells in the mountains, the evidence that the land itself had once been sea. He studied water still always water. He drew rivers, floods, eddies, whirlpools. He wrote about how water carves valleys, how it moves with force, how it mirrors the patterns of hair and smoke. He studied flight, drawing wings, imagining machines, testing models. He never gave up the dream of man rising into the sky. And through it all, he painted one portrait quietly. Privately, that would become the most famous in the world. In Florence, around 1503, he began work on a small painting of a woman, Lisa Gherardini, the wife of a wealthy merchant. To us, she is the Mona Lisa. But that, perhaps, is a story deserving of its own chapter. For now, let us leave Leonardo in Florence. In these restless years, he is older now, in his 50s. He has painted masterpieces, designed machines, studied the body, the earth, the sky. And yet, he remains unsettled. His rivals challenge him, his patrons press him, his projects falter. But his curiosity does not fade, it deepens. Imagine him walking through the streets of Florence at dusk, the Arno glowing with twilight. Children play, merchants close their shops, bells toll across the city. Leonardo walks slowly, his eyes distant, his mind full of questions. He is a man who has done much, and yet feels he has only begun. Around the year 1503 in Florence, Leonardo da Vinci began work on a portrait. At first glance, it was like many others he had painted a commission for a wealthy family. A likeness meant to capture a wife and mother in her prime. The sitter was Lisa Gherardini, the wife of a Florentine merchant named Francesco del Giocondo. She was 24 years old, quiet, respectable, part of the mercantile middle class. But Leonardo approached the painting not as a transaction, not as a simple portrait for display, but as an experiment, a meditation, perhaps even a lifelong companion. From the very beginning, this portrait would be different. Imagine Leonardo in his studio, the panel before him. He begins not with bold strokes, but with layers. Thin, translucent, delicate. He works slowly, adding glazes one upon another, building depth the way light builds at dawn. Each session might last hours, yet the changes were imperceptible. He was not painting a face. He was coaxing a presence into being. The result was the Mona Lisa, perhaps the most famous painting in the world. Her figure is simple. A woman seated, hands folded, turned slightly toward us. Her clothing is modest, her veil thin, her chair plain. But her expression holds the world. Her lips curve into the faintest smile, a smile that seems to change as you look at it. From one angle, it is warm, welcoming. From another, it seems distant, almost sad. Her eyes meet ours, yet they do not fix us, they drift, alive with subtle motion. Behind her, a dreamlike landscape unfolds. Winding rivers, distant mountains, a sky fading into mist. The roads and waters do not quite align, as though the world behind her belongs to another realm, not fantasy, not reality, but somewhere in between. The magic of the painting lies in Leonardo's technique. He used sfumato, a word meaning smoky, to soften transitions between light and shadow. There are no hard edges, no sharp lines. The corners of her mouth, the creases around her eyes, the folds of her veil all dissolve into delicate gradations. It is as though the face emerges from mist, as though it breathes. He studied how muscles of the face moved, how lips curved, how eyes narrowed, how expressions flickered and vanished. He did not paint one expression fixed in time. He painted transition, the moment between moments. That is why her smile seems to shift as we gaze. It is never one thing, never still. He studied optics, how the eye perceives light, how peripheral vision blurs edges. He painted not only what the face was, but how it would be seen. The Mona Lisa does not merely show a woman. It shows the act of seeing itself. Leonardo carried the painting with him for years. Unlike other commissions, he never delivered it. He kept it with him, adjusting, retouching, refining. Some say he worked on it for more than a decade. To him, perhaps, it was no longer a portrait of Lisa del Giocondo. It was something else, a meditation on beauty, on mystery, on life itself. Why did he keep it? Some suggest he loved it too much to part with it. Others that it was never truly finished in his mind. Perhaps it became his mirror, his companion. His masterpiece, not because it was complete, but because it never could be. While he worked on the Mona Lisa, Leonardo was also deepening his scientific studies. His dissections grew more precise. He drew the muscles of the neck, the bones of the spine, the chambers of the heart. He made notes about the circulation of blood, centuries before physicians would confirm them. He described the action of the heart's valves, comparing them to doors swinging open and closed. His sketches of the human fetus are among the most tender ever drawn, not cold diagrams, but delicate images full of reverence for life. In these studies, he was not only artist or scientist, he was both. His anatomical drawings are works of beauty, their lines graceful, their shading soft, their proportions exact. They could hang in galleries as art. They could sit in medical texts as science. They are both at once. He turned also to geology. Travelling through the Tuscan hills, he observed layers of rock, noting how shells of marine creatures were embedded high in the mountains. To most, this was a curiosity. To Leonardo, it was evidence. These lands, he concluded, had once been beneath the sea. The earth itself had changed slowly, over unimaginable time. He wrote about erosion, about rivers carving valleys, about the cycles of water between earth and sky. His insights anticipated geology by centuries, yet they remained hidden, locked in his notebooks, unpublished, unknown. And always, he dreamed of flight. He sketched birds with obsessive care, watching how they tilted their wings, how they caught the wind. He dissected them, studying bones, muscles, feathers. He built models of wings, testing them with pulleys and levers. In one notebook, he drew a machine with great flapping wings, designed to be strapped to a man's back. In another, a helical screw, what we now recognize as a primitive helicopter. He even designed a parachute, a pyramid of cloth meant to slow descent. None of these machines left the ground. Materials were too heavy, mechanics too crude. But the dream mattered. Leonardo believed, truly, that man could rise into the air. And though he himself never flew, his vision would inspire those who later did. Through all of this, the Mona Lisa, the dissections, the geology, The Flight 1 theme united him, the search for pattern. He saw that the spirals of a shell resembled the spirals of hair, the spirals of water. He saw that the branching of trees mirrored the branching of veins. He saw that the human body reflected the proportions of architecture, that the circle and the square contained the essence of harmony. In everything, he looked for unity. For Leonardo, the world was not divided into disciplines. It was one vast design, one great web of beauty and law. Yet, even as his genius deepened, his difficulties remained. He left works unfinished. Patrons grew impatient. Rivals like Michelangelo thrived, completing sculptures and frescoes that dazzled the public. Leonardo, by contrast, laboured slowly, privately. His greatest brilliance hidden in notebooks few would ever see. But he did not measure success as others did. He was not chasing fame or wealth. He was chasing understanding. Imagine him late at night, candle flickering, bent over a page. Around him lie sketches of wings, diagrams of muscles, fragments of equations. The Mona Lisa rests nearby, her smile faint in the dim light. Leonardo dips his pen, writes backward, notes another question. Why is the sky blue? Why do birds glide longer than they flap? How does the heart beat without rest? These are not idle musings. They are the heartbeat of his life. And so, in these years, Leonardo gave the world both the most famous face in history and some of the deepest insights into the body, the earth, and the sky. He painted a smile that never fades. He drew muscles that still astonish doctors. He described rocks that reveal the age of the earth. He dreamed of wings that would one day lift men into the clouds. The Mona Lisa is only part of him. The rest lives in pages of notebooks, in questions that still echo, in visions that still inspire. As Florence admired his portrait, as his notebooks filled with wonders, Leonardo once again grew restless. He had painted, dissected, designed, dreamed. But the world was changing. Rome called, with its popes and its power, its commissions and rivalries. And in time, France would call too. For now, we leave him in Florence older, wiser, still searching. Beside him rests the Mona Lisa, a face that seems to breathe. Before him lies a page, filled with notes about the heart, about the flight of birds, about the layers of stone. Around him, the night is quiet. His mind, as always, is awake. By the second decade of the 16th century, Leonardo da Vinci was no longer the vigorous man of youth. His hair had turned white, his beard long, his hands slower. A stroke had left his right hand weakened, making it difficult for him to paint with the precision he once commanded. And yet, his mind remained as sharp as ever, curious, restless, filled with questions. The Italy he had known was changing. Florence was restless with politics. Rome, though brilliant with artists like Raphael and Michelangelo, offered him little welcome. Leonardo, now in his 60s, was admired, but no longer at the centre of commissions. Younger artists took the spotlight, while he lingered at the edges, still sketching, still questioning. And then an invitation came. King Francis I of France was young, ambitious, and enamoured with the Renaissance spirit. He adored art, admired Italy, and sought to make his court a beacon of culture. To him, Leonardo was not just a painter, not just an inventor, but a living treasure, the embodiment of genius itself. He invited Leonardo to France. He offered him a home, a pension, and freedom, not to rush, not to complete commissions, but to think, to design, to reflect. For Leonardo, wary of politics, wary of unfinished works, it was a chance to find peace. And so, in 1516, at the age of 64, Leonardo crossed the Alps once more. He travelled slowly, likely on mule, accompanied by his devoted pupil Francesco Melzi, and perhaps by his loyal companion Salai. With him, he carried his notebooks, his instruments, and some of his paintings, including the Mona Lisa, still in his possession after more than a decade. The journey was long, but the welcome was warm. Leonardo settled at Clos Lucé, a small manor house near the Royal Share, 2 of Amboise in the Loire Valley. The house was simple but comfortable, its rooms filled with light, its gardens opening to the French countryside. Here, within walking distance of the king himself, Leonardo would spend his final years. Francis visited often, walking with the old master in the gardens, listening to his thoughts on art, on nature, on philosophy. It is said the king called Leonardo the greatest man who ever lived. For Leonardo, this admiration was perhaps more precious than gold. He did not need wealth or titles. He needed understanding, and here he was cherished. In France, Leonardo no longer painted with his former vigor. His weakened hand made long hours at the easel difficult. But he did not stop working. He continued to draw, to sketch designs for palaces, for gardens, for ideal cities. He filled pages with ideas for canals, with plans for monuments, with reflections on the flow of water and the flight of birds. He taught Melzi, entrusting him with the care of his notebooks, his manuscripts, his legacy. Melzi became not only his assistant, but his confidant, his companion, almost like a son. To him, Leonardo gave his thoughts, his secrets, his unfinished dreams. Visitors to Clos Lucé described the rooms filled with drawings, models, papers scattered across tables, half-finished machines. The house became less a residence than a laboratory of the mind, a place where thoughts continued to unfold. Even as the body slowed, in these years, Leonardo reflected deeply. He wrote notes that feel almost like whispers from the edge of life. Just as a well-spent day brings happy sleep, he wrote, so a well-employed life brings a happy death. It was not resignation, it was peace. He looked back at his life at Florence, at Milan, at Rome, at his journeys through cities and courts. He remembered paintings left unfinished, notebooks filled with questions, inventions never built. To others, these might have seemed failures. To Leonardo, they were signs of a life lived in wonder. For he had always sought questions more than answers. There is a legend, perhaps not true, but beautiful nonetheless. It is said that on his deathbed, Leonardo was cradled in the arms of King Francis, who wept at his passing. Whether this moment truly happened does not matter. What matters is the truth it conveys. Leonardo was loved, honoured, cherished to the end. On May 2, 1519, Leonardo da Vinci passed away at Clos Lucé at the age of 67. He left behind no children, no heirs, but he left the world something great of a lifetime of art, of notebooks, of visions, of dreams. His burial was quiet. He was laid to rest in the chapel of St. Florentin in Amboise. Over the centuries, the chapel fell into ruin, his grave disturbed, his bones scattered. Today, his exact resting place is uncertain, and yet, perhaps that is fitting. For Leonardo does not rest in stone. He rests in pages, in paintings, in questions that still echo through time. Imagine him now, in those final days at Clos Lucé. The garden outside is green with spring. The air carries the scent of blossoms. In his study, papers lie scattered, filled with sketches of wings, of hearts, of rivers. The Mona Lisa rests nearby, her smile eternal. Melzi sits quietly watching, listening, absorbing. Leonardo dips his pen one last time, writes a few final notes, and sets it down. The candle flickers low. He leans back, eyes closed, his breath soft. And then silence. Leonardo's life was not marked by completion, but by curiosity. He left paintings unfinished, machines unbuilt, notebooks unpublished. And yet his legacy is greater for it, for what he gave was not answers, but an invitation to look closer, to wonder, to question, to dream. In France, in those final years, he found peace. And in peace, he left the world not with finality, but with a smile, faint and mysterious, like the one he painted so many years before. Centuries have passed since Leonardo da Vinci walked the hills of Tuscany, sketched in the streets of Florence, painted in the courts of Milan, or rested in the quiet gardens of France. And yet, his presence feels near, as if the man with the flowing beard and searching eyes still lingers just beyond the corner of history, notebook in hand, pausing to observe a bird's flight, a ripple of water, a face in the crowd. What makes Leonardo endure? Why do we remember him not only as a painter, but as something more, as a figure almost outside of time? Perhaps it is because Leonardo embodied contradiction. He was a man of infinite beginnings and rare completions. He promised patrons grand works, then abandoned them for new ideas. He painted slowly, cautiously, layering glazes until years had passed. He drew thousands of inventions, but built almost none. He was, by ordinary standards, unreliable. And yet, genius is often messy. Brilliance does not move in straight lines. Leonardo was not concerned with deadlines or products. He was concerned with understanding. To him, every brushstroke, every sketch, every question was a step toward truth. He painted only a handful of works in his lifetime, and fewer still survive. But among them are the Last Supper and the Mona Lisa, two of the most recognized images in human history. How is it that one man, with so few finished paintings, reshaped art forever? The answer lies not in quantity, but in depth. His figures breathe, his light glows, his shadows live. He painted not only appearances, but presence. He gave us faces that seem to think, to feel, to exist beyond the frame. He transformed painting from image into psychology, from surface into soul. Yet Leonardo was never only a painter. His notebooks show us a mind stretching across every field: anatomy, geology, optics, mechanics, flight. He dissected bodies and drew the heart with accuracy that modern surgeons still admire. He sketched flying machines centuries before men rose into the air. He described the age of rocks, the flow of rivers, the cycle of water, long before geology existed. He asked questions so simple they still make us pause. Why is the sky blue? Why does a cat always land on its feet? Why do birds glide longer than they flap? Questions that a child might ask, but that he pursued with relentless depth. His notebooks, scattered and hidden for centuries, remind us that he was not only of his time, but ahead of it. He thought in patterns the world was not yet ready to see. But beyond the genius, there was a man. He was illegitimate, born outside the privileges of nobility. He never received a full classical education. He wrote in mirrored script, perhaps to keep his thoughts private, perhaps only to avoid smudging the ink with his left hand. He dressed elegantly, sometimes flamboyantly. He loved music, theatre, animals. He bought birds in cages, only to set them free. He lived with companions who puzzled others, relationships whispered about but never fully known. He was not a saint, not flawless. He doubted himself. He left tasks undone. He was sometimes lonely, sometimes withdrawn, often misunderstood. And perhaps that is what makes him so enduring. He was not perfection embodied, but humanity reaching. What can we learn from Leonardo? Perhaps that curiosity itself is a form of greatness. That asking why is as important as answering how. That to look closely at the veins of a leaf, or the smile of a woman, is to glimpse the same mystery that shapes the stars. Perhaps that disciplines are illusions that art and science, beauty and logic, emotion and reason are not opposites, but partners. To paint a face, Leonardo studied muscles. To design a machine, he studied birds. To understand light, he painted shadows. He lived without walls between fields of thought. And in doing so, he discovered connections that still inspire us. Perhaps, too, that life is not measured by what we finish, but by what we seek. Leonardo left much undone, but he lived in wonder every day. Imagine him once more, in his youth, crouched by a stream, watching how water ripples around a stone. Imagine him in Verrocchio's workshop, painting an angel so alive that it startled his master. Imagine him in Milan, standing before the wall of Santa Maria del Grazie, sketching apostles in motion. Imagine him in Florence, layering glazes on the Mona Lisa until her smile shimmered into eternity. Imagine him in France, walking with Francis I, speaking softly of the patterns of nature. Across all these scenes, one thread runs: constant attention. Leonardo paid attention deeper, longer, more carefully than others. Where we glance, he gazed. Where we assumed, he questioned. Where we passed by, he lingered. And in that attention he found wonder. 500 years later, we still stand before his paintings, still pore over his notebooks, still marvel at his inventions. He left us no empire, no army, no book of laws. He left us something far greater: the invitation to see light as more than brightness, to see the body as more than flesh, to see the world as more than parts, to see life itself as a pattern worth tracing, again and again. As you lie here tonight, listening to his story, perhaps you feel what Leonardo felt, that quiet tug of curiosity, that soft wonder at the world. Perhaps you think of the sky, or the flow of water, or the mystery of a smile. Perhaps you close your eyes and see not answers, but questions. That is his gift to us. Not certainty, but wonder. Not completion, but curiosity. Leonardo da Vinci lived as a seeker, and in seeking, he became timeless. And so, our story draws to a close. The candle burns low, the night deepens. Leonardo rests now, not in a chapel of stone, but in the pages he left behind, in the paintings that still breathe, in the questions that still stir our minds. As you drift towards sleep, carry with you this truth, that curiosity is endless, that beauty is everywhere, that to ask why is to touch the mystery of life itself. Leonardo knew this, and now, perhaps so do we.